I know what you might be thinking. Dave, it's not Monday. Why are you in my podcast app? Because I'm going to do a little cross promotion here in July. On Wednesdays, I'm going to give you a short version of other shows that I do. And today, I'm spotlighting a show I do every Saturday live at 10:30 Eastern. It's called Ask the Podcast Coach. It starts with something like this.
Let's get ready to podcast.
And it's myself and my co-host Jim Collison, who does Home Gadget Geeks podcast. He also works for Gallop, you know, the polling people. Yeah, he does podcasting for a living. How cool is that? And we take your questions live and answer them right off the top of our head. It's a very loose show, and it's one of my shows that I started as a test, and, well, whatever it is, 11 years later, we're still doing it. And I try to find questions that aren't the typical ones, although there are plenty of those. And if you want to hear them, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/700, links in the show description, where for my 700th episode, I answered 54 podcast questions in 26 minutes. But this wasn't one of them. So here is me and Jim as we tackle the question about, hey, I've got one person in my community that's kind of ruining things. Meanwhile, back at the weird question that I don't know how to answer. How do you guys handle fans that are a little too fanatic about your show? He says, for example, we have a Discord channel for our podcast. One member floods every single channel with questions and thoughts and comments. It's like they're live tweeting, listening to an episode, and they write every single thought that comes into their head while listening, even if the episode aired years ago. If another fan writes something, they overtake the whole conversation. I don't want anyone to feel discouraged from listening or participating, but I'm not sure how to handle someone so passionate that they're generally, well, annoying. And I was like, that's a question I don't see a lot. Because usually it's like, how do I get people to comment on things and that? I've seen other companies. I've been in groups where, especially many times, these types of comments don't bring a lot of value. They're kind of like, likewise also. Trying to find a different way to say me too. But somebody will say, I did a thing and the thing then happened, and they'll go like, oh yeah, me too. And you're like, okay, or whatever. And every time somebody says anything, they're like, great point. Or it's just not. In one case, because that one person was annoying, every single person in the group was like, is there any way to like tell so-and-so to like ease off of it? And they just ended up shutting down the whole thing rather than upset one person and dash the, love of a single, audience member. They just shut the whole thing down. And I was like, boy, that's now I was in that group. Person was really annoying. And I actually left the group before they shut it down. But Jim, have you ever had anything or seen anything like this?
Oh yeah. Yeah. All the time. I think it's one of those situations where you need to, first of all, be patient with it. Let it run its course. Because I always think if this person can figure it out, and then, and if people come to me and say, hey, so-and-so's always there or always responding or whatever, not appropriate, I tell them the same thing. Be patient. Let's see where this goes. Sometimes the universe fixes itself at that point. But you got to be patient, right? And you're going to have to feel, if you're a moderator, and this is, in these cases, usually I'm the moderator. Because if I'm not, I just leave the group if it gets annoying. But so wait and see if the universe, and it's really, really hard because you don't have as much patience as you think you do.
Right.
And what feels like, months is actually just days. And you're like, oh yeah, this has been actually just since last Thursday. So give it some time as we go through. Then I think you have to have a private conversation with the individual. Got to pull them aside privately. This is not, I think it's where a lot of folks make mistakes is they try to handle this thing in public, right? They try to handle it in the threads. Hey, you got to handle this privately on the side. Hey, pull them aside, have a conversation, call them if you can. if that's applicable, whatever. But have this conversation that says, listen, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your dedication to what we're doing here, but I am getting some negative feedback. Now you run the risk they're going to say, "Who?" I want to talk to them.
Right.
You're like, we're not going to do that. Like, we're just not going to do that here. You run the risk of driving them off. Usually, when that happens, they leave very, very loudly. And you got to kind of be willing to. This area in leadership, I think, and as an admin in a group like this, you're a leader. I think this is one of those areas in leadership that is the hardest part about leading people. Is you're gonna have situations like this, and you just got to kind of swallow it and say, well, that I made a decision for the betterment of the group, and not just in the individual. The needs of the many are worth more than the needs of the few. If we're going to pull in a Star Trek reference, so it's almost a no-win situation. You don't walk away from this going, oh. Sometimes maybe, but most times, you don't walk away going, man, that really worked out well. It's always a disaster that you're like, well, I had to do it.
Yeah, you made a great point though, because what's the bumper sticker? It's always praise in public and something criticize in private.
Correct in private.
Yeah. And so that's where, if you can find a scapegoat, you could say, I don't know if you realize this, but there are people that have their app set up so that every time you leave a comment in Discord, like it pings them. And, I love all your comments. Is there any way, instead of putting them out, like I see here where you put out 9 comments in about a minute and a half, is there any way you could just wait and put out one comment, kind of consolidate them all? It would make it a little less, these people are getting pinged all the time. I love your comments, but is there any way you can kind of consolidate them? That way you're making the app the bad guy. Hey, it's pinging people. We can't help it. As opposed to, hey, I'm so glad that you love the show, but good God, are you annoying? Is there any way you could stop being? Yeah, I don't know that would work, but that's a tricky one.
I've had 2. I've had to deal with from memory. I'm sure there's more, but 2. Neither one of them ended well. And fortunately, they ended. So they left the community and never to be heard from again. It's still painful and it still hurts. And most of us don't like to have to confront people that way. That's just not a natural, people are like, oh, yay, today I get to confront people. Yeah. This is going to be awesome. I love this job. Now, most of us get into podcasting thinking we're going to say things and people are going to praise us. Oh, you're so smart. Thank you. That's what we're looking for, like that dopamine hit from people saying, oh, you're so smart. Thank you. Blah, 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 blah. But we forget, as humans, we're all broken. And so you're going to attract people that are needy, and they're going to want more than you can give or more than you're willing to give. And you've got to be willing to set some boundaries, I think, in this to say, this is what I can do for you. By the way, the earlier, and this may not back up what you said, Dave, but the earlier you confront these problems with people, the better.
Yeah.
And this contradicts what I just said of letting the universe, to maybe see if it takes care of itself. But you can't let it go too long, because the longer it goes, the more painful it is for some people. So I don't know. I just contradicted myself, but maybe that's that
kind of goes back to the whole why. When I saw this question, I'm like, I am not sure, what I would do here. Jay says, I like the idea of pointing out that comments could be consolidated. Yeah, and going back to what you're saying, we all want to be liked. And so when you have to kind of not reprimand, but you have somebody who's they're on fire about your show, and you're like, hey, I really love the fact that you're on 12 on a scale from 1 to 10, and you're trying to say, can you back that down to 9 without saying, can you back that down to 9? It's kind of, so it's kind of tricky, but it's,
it's maybe where community standards are important too, where you've got some kind of manifest or some kind of charter in your social groups that says, hey, here's kind of the expected behavior. And if you can kind of say that, like you said, say that in a way, like hey, this is really a little bit more than I was looking for in this kind of group. Can I ask you just to back it down a little bit? That's super easy to say here. It's super hard to say when you're looking at the individual, talking to them. But
that's why you do it over text.
Well, you don't. I don't think you do that.
No, you need tone of voice here.
Conversation. Yeah. I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of folks make is they take the easy way out and they try to do it via. And of course, words, text always has a negative implication to it, and so people read it in a different way, right? It's pretty difficult. It's where you really find out if you're a leader or not. I think in some regard, and it's okay. We don't all have to be leaders, right, in what we do, but you kind of find out pretty quickly. Like, I'm pretty good at leading people, or because you can't lead people unless you can have these kinds of conversations.
And just like you said, you have to have, doesn't make it any easier, but you have to have that vision of this person is going to drive people out of this community. Yeah. And if I have to accidentally hurt someone's feelings, we all hate doing that. But 8 months from now, we'll be in a much better place. And so I've got to go through this pain point to get to the better place. It's just, it sounds easy on paper. It's just not.
No, it's super hard. But maybe that's where you use the good news, bad news, good news, right? Hey, thank you. I love your passion here. I appreciate you being a part of this. Some great stuff. There's a few areas here, though, that have become a little bit of a concern to me. And this, and that. I'd really like you to continue to do what you do because these things are important to me. So kind of that good news, bad news, good news conversation. Yeah. So
I forget who, I got that off of Reddit. I forget who the actual person was, but good luck with that. Cause holy cow, that's a tricky one.
You're always going to get one. Yeah. It's going to happen. Yeah. You will have a super enthusiastic, maybe overly enthusiastic person in your community. And if you can turn that into, oftentimes they can be very, very helpful. If you can focus, you might need to give them more attention. But if you can focus that energy in positive, constructive ways for the group, they can do some amazing things. Just got to get them going in the right direction.
That's it. And there you have it. Now, we will be happy to answer those common questions that do come up because, look, there are more people starting podcasts every single day. So we expect to answer some of those more common questions as well. If you'd like to join the show, it's at Ask the Podcast Coach is the website. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live is where you can watch live every Saturday at 10:30 Eastern. AskThePodcastCoach.com/question is where you can jump into the live video and ask your question that way. Otherwise, you can just use the chat. And if you're like, look, I can't get up at that time, simply go to Ask the Podcast Coach. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a little microphone. You can click that and record a question, and we will play your question and answer it right there on the show. I will see you Monday with a new episode of the School of Podcasting.
Yeah.